him spiritually when you meet him.
Thank you, Don. Pleasure. We'll be right back. Stay with us. In 1981, in prison, IRA members launched a hunger strike to gain recognition as political prisoners. 21 Irish mothers were faced with the dilemma of choosing between their son's life and their son's wishes. Some Mother's Son is the dramatized story of two of those mothers. The film stars one of Britain's most celebrated actresses, Helen Mirren, and it marks the directorial debut of Terry George. He co-wrote the screenplay for In the Name of the Father. He wrote the screenplay for this film. Both of them join me now, and I'm pleased to have them on this broadcast. Welcome again.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Great to have you here. Tell me about this film and how you got involved, because you're not only in it, you're the co-producer, is that right? Or
associate producer is my
producer.
official title, yeah.
Yes.
Well, Terry, how long ago was it, Terry, you sent that
I
we
guess
talked?
1991 was the first draft.
Was it?
Yeah.
So that long ago, was it,
Yeah.
that we first talked? We have a friend in common, Liam Neeson, who
was just here this week.
Oh, was he? Oh,
Yes.
really? Yeah. Well, he knew Terry before I did, and he'd called me up and said, I've got this, great friend, writer called Terry George, and he's got a script that I think you should look at. And that was my first awareness of the script. At that particular time, the peace process was very much not in place. It was a time of quite of a lot of violence in England, Britain, and I was very wary of, as a British person, becoming involved in something.
Wary because?
Wary, well, also because the script was, I think, was quite different at that time. At least my perception of it was very different. It was more political and less a human story, which is what it eventually became. But anyway, so Terry and I talked over the years. The peace process came into place. Castle Rock wanted to do a film with me and with Terry and Jim, and this was the script that we presented to them, and they very kindly gave us the money to make it.
Why'd you get involved as an associate producer? Because you wanted to...
Well, I guess originally I took the script to Castle Rock.
Okay.
That was basically...
You were the linkage to the
yes.
distributor.
Yeah. Yes.
Tell me the story.
Yes.
What story are you telling here?
Well, it's the story of mothers in war. This was an event that for me, because I grew up in West Belfast and lived there during 1981, was the defining moment in the Troubles. Not because it was any more horrific or spectacular than a whole series of atrocities or conflict or violence, but because on this unique occasion, families, mothers particularly, were dragged into the hunger strike and at a key moment asked to choose decide the fate of their sons, because the mothers and the families became aware through doctors and the church and the British government that when Bobby Sands and his fellow hunger strikers lapsed into a coma, that legally the parents then had the right to intervene and take their sons off the hunger strike. And in doing,
if they didn't do that, then they would die from it.
and that was their son's wish. So this one event seemed to catapult the Northern Ireland situation out into a story that everyone could understand, because basically it was a choice of personal sacrifice or family. And I wanted to tell that story. And at the same time, there was something so unique and bizarre and courageous and pathetic and sad about the hunger strike and about the mothers, their courage and their pathos that I wanted to get across.
You were just in Britain, you said to me before we started. And at least a British interviewer was attacking you in a hard-nosed way. Why? What's the issue for this interviewer? What was it? Was it the fact that, as some critics point out, that they think the British are caricatured here, or stereotypical, that they seem to have no sort of compassion or humane values, while
I don't
most
think
of that...
It's not as simple as that. In
What
fact, some of our... I mean, there was a very mixed reaction in Britain. The reviewers, the artistic community, if you like, saw the film absolutely for what it was, including the reviewers in some of the most establishment press, like the Daily Telegraph, you know, the Times. But some of the editorial, the very particularly extremely right-wing editorial, you know, in Britain we don't have the attempt to be bipartisan that you do in your American press. There are very, very partisan newspapers. And I think as far as these extreme right-wing journalists were concerned, I think they find it impossible to see any film about Northern Ireland objectively. That's my only explanation, because the extremity of some of the reactions from those people was that they just weren't watching
What's
the film.
their complaint is what I'm asking.
They said it was pro-IRA, basically.
Pro-IRA, and you don't see it that way?
Absolutely not.
Do you see it that way, too?
No. In fact, funny enough, the IRA don't see it that way.
No, exactly.
What are they saying?
Well, they said it was dodgy politics, and
They wanted you to have a clear point of view, and you didn't.
that I minimised the hunger strike at the expense of the political story over these, what they call some wishy-washy liberal story about women, which is, you know...
Is that what they said, wishy-washy women's story?
Well, yeah, that's the context. It's not the exact words, but that was the basic review in An Fabhlach, which is the Republican Movement's newspaper. But this is a subject in the British Isles that no one is neutral on. People who are neutral are, you know, subjectively neutral almost, or like actively neutral. There's no one that has an opinion on Northern Ireland that doesn't get quite, you know, angry and strong about it. My opinion is that in the last 2 years we had an opportunity to resolve this genuinely, and that there were people in all factions, the British government, the Irish government, Sinn Féin, the loyalist parties, who genuinely wanted to see an end of this. And yet none of them could find the foresight to get beyond particular positions that they had dug themselves into. And you know, I think it's particularly sad now that it boiled down again to the politics of the British Parliament, because the British Parliament was on such a knife edge of division that ultimately the peace process fell apart.
I mean, it's our job as artists to kind of get up their noses, you know.
Get up their noses, is that a British expression?
Oh, yeah, you don't have that here. I don't know, what's the equivalent American expression?
Oh, get up their noses is pretty good. That's good.
Get up their noses and irritate them. And we successfully, which to me is an absolute mark of the success of the film, we successfully irritated both sides because we were telling a story about people. And